Be honest. How many times have you looked in the mirror today and fixed something before you felt ready to be seen? Women spend our lives covering and correcting and trying to look younger, but who taught us that our natural faces needed fixing in the first place? Most men can wash their face, brush their teeth, maybe run a comb or brush through their hair, and they're ready to walk out the door. They're ready for the world. And most women are expected to do a whole lot more before we're considered presentable, and that difference starts shaping us a long time before we're old enough to question it. This isn't about whether you should or shouldn't wear makeup. It's about why we expect more from women than we do from men, and how those expectations shape our choices over an entire lifetime. A few weeks ago, someone commented on a video that my 60-year-old face was sloppy and I was lazy for not wearing makeup. Within seconds of seeing it, I knew that I would be making a video about it. I stopped wearing makeup more than a decade ago, so I've heard plenty of opinions about it. But when I read that comment, I didn't feel wounded by it. I thought it revealed much, much more about what she had been taught than it did about my face. This was never really a debate about beauty or effort or being presentable. It was about women being conditioned to believe that our natural state isn't enough. And not just even not enough, not even worth presenting to the world. I made a video about that comment, which I'll link at the end of this video, and I'll put it in the description as well. And more than 3,500 of you weighed in. And what I heard wasn't a group of women arguing about makeup. I heard women saying they were tired of the expectation and performing, and tired of being judged when they stopped participating in it. And it was really empowering, honestly, to hear so many women proudly talking about how they had stepped away from makeup. I encourage you to go read through the comments, and how they had embraced their own faces. Thousands of women recognizing that their worth didn't lie here. And this is why it was never about one woman's comment. Her comment was simply a very clear example of something women have been living with for generations. Because when something has felt normal for a long time, questioning it can feel really personal. But here's the thing, if stepping away from something, it changes how you're treated, and if opting out makes you seem less professional or less put together, then there's pressure involved, whether we name it or not. And this is where the word patriarchy comes into it. Bear with me. I know some people hear that word and they think it means blaming men or hating men. It doesn't. I'm not talking about your husband or your father or your son, or mine for that matter, or any individual man. It's not about them deciding about makeup. My own husband's preference is that I not wear makeup back when I did, because he didn't like how it felt or even smelled. And he has never expected me to change my face for him. But whether my husband likes makeup really isn't the point. The point is that he can, wash his face and brush his teeth and do all those things, and he can leave the house just as he is without anyone questioning whether he's done enough to be presentable. Patriarchy simply describes a society in which men have historically held most of the power over laws and money, employment, media, the standards everyone was expected to follow. And in that society, women's securities and opportunities were much more closely connected to being considered attractive and respectable and acceptable to men. Those ideas were passed down for generations by men and by women until they began to feel completely normal. And we've been swept up in these norms for so long that we perform them without question. So when women judge other women for not following those rules, it doesn't prove that patriarchy had nothing to do with them. It shows how thoroughly all of us learned them. Women didn't, create the system, but we can absolutely help keep it going. And, then there's this part. It hurts because women start policing each other. And when one woman judges another for opting out, I sometimes wonder if there's this unspoken question, if you can walk out the door exactly as you are, then what has all of my effort really been for? This was never about the individual men in our lives. It's about a patriarchal history that has benefited from women staying small and remaining focused on our perceived flaws. When we're busy fixing ourselves and spending all of our time and money and attention, instead, look at all the other things that we could be doing with our lives. And you can see how these standards are created by looking at body hair, for example. In 1950, way back, Gillette marketed a razor specifically for women as wearing sleeveless things became popular as women. It was normalized for women to like show their arms and their shoulders. And advertising turned women's perfectly harmless hair into something embarrassing. A normal part of the female body became a problem almost exactly at the moment that a company had a product to sell us. And that pattern never really stopped. Find something natural about women, convince us it needs correcting, and then charge us for the solution. It's particularly convenient that women have historically learned less too, while being expected to spend more simply to maintain a level playing field. It's about the way completely normal features of being a woman are repeatedly turned into problems, and how easily a product becomes an expectation. When I stopped wearing makeup, the consequences were pretty immediate. People saying, "Are you feeling okay? You look tired," but nothing was wrong. I had simply stopped performing for anyone. And that's what I mean when I say opting out can come with social consequences. Because if nobody cared whether women wore makeup, not wearing it wouldn't change how anyone responded to us. Nobody would assume something was wrong because they could suddenly see our face that had been there all along. Choosing not to wear makeup should be just as ordinary as choosing to wear it. A woman's natural face shouldn't be treated like some announcement or rebellious act or evidence that something has gone wrong in her life. But these expectations, they don't begin when we become adults. We start learning them much earlier, often by watching the women that are closest to us. And if you're a parent, or someone influential in a young person's life, it's worth remembering that children really don't just hear what we say. They watch what we live. And I always told my own daughters that they could show up however they wanted. And I meant that. And, I didn't want them to struggle with the same insecurities and lack of confidence that I had felt. And I wanted them to know that they were perfect as they were without embellishment. But unfortunately, they also had a mother who didn't truly believe that about herself yet. And they saw my habits and my routines and expectations that I placed on myself. And they noticed things that I worried about even when I didn't, say them out loud. And worse yet, sometimes I did say them out loud. And they heard my negative self-talk. And, even with the best intentions, those things get passed on. And, many women in the comments even said that they had simply adopted the routines of their mothers and grandmothers, long before they decided what they even believed about makeup for themselves. They had already learned what a woman was supposed to do before leaving the house. And that doesn't mean mothers shouldn't wear makeup. It doesn't mean that we need to replace the old rules with a new rule that says natural is the only acceptable choice. Of course not. It simply means that our daughters should see that these things really are choices, and that many of the decisions that we make early in life don't feel like pressure. They just feel normal. And when children see the women around them repeatedly changing or criticizing their own appearances, that becomes part of what normal means to them too. So whether you keep wearing makeup because you love it or you put it down today, the goal is the same. To choose freely. We don't need to be fixed before we're allowed to be seen. I have said this before, and it's worth saying again. If makeup brings you joy, wear it. If going without it brings you peace, honor that. That's where I am at this stage of my life. But it's worth asking whether our expectations of ourselves and others are actually balanced. One group is expected to do more simply to be considered ready, and that isn't about preference, it's about culture, and we should always be willing to question the culture that we live in, especially when it will continue shaping young women in the future. We don't need another rule telling women what to do with our faces, but we should be willing to question why one group is expected to do so much more simply to be considered presentable. Because the moment opting out changes how you're treated, it was never just a preference, it was an expectation. You are more than your reflection in the mirror. That is just your packaging. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.